In today's show, we got a first preview playthrough of a brand new indie fighter. My name's Mike, and this is the Retro Game Boy Show. Making a fighting game is really hard. They take a long time to create, balance, and perfect. There are very few dev teams in the world that take on this unicorn genre, and it's no surprise that since the early 90s, there are only a few IPs that have managed to stay relevant even today. The Sega Genesis indie dev scene has exploded in recent years as new tools make development more accessible, and hardware like the Sega Mega Drive have rekindled players' love for the timeless 16-bit era. There have been a few indie developed fighters come onto the scene like 𝗵𝗺𝗵𝗀𝗃 and the recently released Insane Pain. And with each release, the genre moves closer in the indie dev space to the AAA behemoths like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, and yes, even Eternal Champions. The game we're going to be previewing in today's show moves the indie dev fighter even closer to the AAA space, and with it still in development, it has the potential to be one of the top fighters on Sega's 16-bit system. The story of Go For It is as interesting as any preview I could give you about an indie dev game. The development is being led by John Springer, who after suffering a life-threatening illness decided to make a change in his life and do something he loves, and that's make pizza and video games. We'll save the full story for another show and maybe get an interview with this legend of a man, but to embark on a journey to create a pizzeria around retro gaming and a retro gaming dev studio is brilliant. John and his team have bought the rights to a number of unreleased titles, something that's always been my dream, and is now improving them and releasing them as physical Sega Genesis and Mega Drive games. One of the first that's going to be released is Go For It, and John has sent me a couple of builds that I can preview and share with you. So this is Go For It. Go For It is currently 70% complete, and the team are hoping to release later this year, although they don't want to rush it to market if it's not ready. The game features 8 characters, all with fleshed out backstories. Currently, I don't know what the overarching story is to the game, but each character has an interesting narrative, and I hope this makes it into the final game. The first thing I found when playing Go For It was just how fast the game is. It's insane, and the AI can be relentless with their attacks, so you really need to know your movesets to compete against it. Thankfully, there's a slower speed and an easier mode that eases you into the game, or can be the default if you prefer time to think about your next move. On my first playthrough of Go For It, I wasn't sure if I liked it. The combat is solid enough, and each character has a ton of moves, but I wasn't quite sure how to play it. It has Street Fighter special moves, but you don't pull off special moves like in Street Fighter. It has a similar combo system to Mortal Kombat, but doesn't play like Mortal Kombat. On my second playthrough, I discovered the throw moves. I should have really read the instructions, and when this happened, I realised how to play this game. Go For It is a kind of 2D Tekken fighter. All the moves are easy to pull off, even the special moves. You have 2-button grapples and attack moves, and combining directions and buttons pulls off different attacks. Once I had the idea of Tekken in my head, the game opened up for me. I was able to put moves together to open up an opponent's defense, jump over and attack in midair before landing and following up with another attack. The speed of the game made sense now, and as I perfected my main character, Juan, I moved into the harder mode and the faster speed, and it was glorious. Understanding that this was not Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat opened my eyes to the potential of this fighting game and what it brings to the roster of fighters already on the system. I mentioned the plethora of moves each character has, and to be honest, this is one of the core reasons the combat in this game works. Previous indie fighters, even fighters originally released on the system, suffered because of the lack of moves. Again, playing as Juan, I found that I had around 14 different moves that range between aerial, standing, and ground attacks. The movesets also have defensive and retreating attacks, meaning that you can lure your opponent into an attack. You can also block in the game, and players who learn how to use this effectively can be devastating. There is a version of the game that has a power bar you need to fill up in order to pull off your special moves, but I like being able to trigger them whenever you want. It does make it susceptible to cheesy players, but once you've mastered a character, you know how to maneuver around these cheap moves. A fight is won in the traditional way, first 2 wins. And there's a timer as well that once depleted awards the victory to the player with the most health. I've not come across a draw scenario yet, so I don't know what happens here. I'd love to be able to increase the number of fights in a game. As I get better at any fighter, I always increase the number of rounds to get more out of a session of fighting. Go For It also has a training mode called Workout that lets you try out your moves against a stupid AI character. This is a really cool mode and helped me refine some of my moves. The Workout mode though does have a timer, and I hope this gets removed in the final game. I would find myself getting into my training session with my character only for the timer to run out. Also, in this early build, there's no pause menu, and again, in the training mode, this would be great to see your move list. Alongside arcade mode and workout, you have options, jukebox, and more importantly, versus mode. Versus mode is where the game comes to life and where any fighter finds its long-term fun factor. Go For It is a ton of fun in versus mode, and we played for a good 2 hours trying out new moves and characters. My son loves it and asks every day if he can play against me. Visually, the game has got a lot going for it. The characters are well drawn and the animations are nice and snappy. There's a lot of diversity in the characters' designs, and not just in their movesets, but in their actual visual designs. There's some nice secondary animation on the characters, like cloth moving on the character, or muscle moving as the character performs an attack. There are still a few unfinished areas of the game. The character select screens, winner screens, and general presentation outside of the game all still need to be implemented. The fonts are a little hard to read, but I'm guessing the legibility will be improved as development continues. One area I do think could do with a little bit more work is the backgrounds. There are a couple that are awesome, like the Savannah level, but they're all just a little static and could do with a little bit more narrative in them. For example, on the racetrack, I'd love to have seen 2 cars parked up or crashed together in the background, with their drivers and the crowd cheering. Or the wrestling ring could do with some more parallax scrolling with flashing light bulbs going off as people take pictures of the fight happening down below them. It would be a big piece of work, but it would make a huge difference to the overall game. Apart from the backgrounds, I'd love to see the characters move in slow motion on their death blow, just like in Street Fighter 2. It really helps you savor the moment and makes the win feel even more gratifying. And lastly, camera shake when a character hits the floor after being thrown. These little touches can help lift a game from being a good game to being a great game. But if none of that's possible, you still have a great looking game in Go For It. Lastly, we have the sound design. And from what I understand, this is going to be overhauled, and so what we're going to hear today may be very different from what appears in the final game. But from what is in the game, I really like the soundtracks for the levels. Some of them could be more representative of the location you're in. The racetrack could be more synth rock at a Desert Strike, the fairground could be more upbeat. The same goes for sound effects. Not much is in the game at the moment, but what is there is good. I hope we get different impact sounds for light and strong attacks, as well as something for when your character hits the ground. Getting the sound effect design right on a fighter is vital to give that added feedback to players. If you want to see what I mean, watch a fight of Street Fighter 2 with the sound on and then off. You really feel the impact of attacks with a great sound effect design. Again, the game is still in development, and I'm sure these little touches will go in. It's often that the last 20% of a game is what takes the longest part of developing it. Overall, I'm really enjoying Go For It, and it's already by far the best indie fighter out there. The combat is different in a good way, and after a few fights you'll see what I mean. Moving between the crushing grappling moves, to a retreating special, to a bone-crunching backhand. It's all very satisfying, and the game is fast. I think if the team can really utilise these last few months to bring up the polish and presentation, then they will have a game that can hold its head up high against some of the big hitters from back in the day. Any team that is going to take on the fighter genre on a classic console has my utmost respect. Like I said, these are some of the hardest games to create in gaming in general. Trying to get the balance, the feel, the look, the sound right. It all has to be perfect, otherwise it falls apart. And this team seemed to be on a path that could get us the closest we've ever been to having a AAA developed indie fighter on the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive. I'm definitely going to be following John's story a lot more and hopefully get a few more updates to the build that I can share with you in the future. Now, if you enjoy content like this, if you love the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive, or if you just love retro gaming, then why not consider subscribing? You can do this by clicking on a little button just below this video. We put out brand new shows every single week, and so that you don't miss it, you can also click on a little bell, which is just below the video as well. Now, if you can't wait till next week, don't worry, because we've got a huge back catalogue of retro gaming videos for you to enjoy, 2 of which you can watch over here.